Due to the efforts of government regulators, shippers, and rail carriers, over 99.997% of hazardous materials are loaded, shipped, transported, and unloaded safely. However, sometimes hazardous leaks occur during normal transportation. These leaks are called non-accident releases, or NARs. Most of these leaks are small and the quantity released is generally limited. NARs usually occur from improperly secured or defective valves and fittings. While the amount of product released in an NAR may be small, the consequences can be large. Railroad and industry employees can be injured from exposure to an NAR of hazardous materials, shipments can be delayed while the car is secured, local communities may have to expend resources to respond, rail yards may be shut down, shippers can be fined, and the product may become contaminated. The majority of NARs can be prevented by the use of proper loading, unloading, and maintenance procedures and making employees aware of the effects of NARs. The safe transportation of hazardous materials is a team effort. It takes proper preparation and correct handling to get a shipment from origin to destination safely and without incident. This program is intended to assist shippers and receivers of hazardous materials in reducing NARs by providing a guide for the proper securement of tank cars. Most of this information is based on the best industry practices found in BOE Pamphlet 34, Recommended Methods for the Safe Loading and Unloading of Non-Pressure, General Service, and Pressure Tank Cars. The program is divided into 3 primary sections. The first will cover recommended practices that are applicable to all types of tank cars. The second section will review the proper securement practices for General Service tank cars. The last section will review the proper securement practices for pressure tank cars. Please make sure this information is shared with your plant personnel and your customers. Working together, we can eliminate all NARs. We can get to zero. Section 1. Recommendations for all tank cars. To ensure safe operations prior to loading or unloading, put a caution sign, commonly known as a blue flag, into place. Put a sign up at both ends of the car if it can be approached from either direction. Prevent entry into the track by locking the switch and/or locking a derail. Check the handbrakes to make certain they have been applied. Do not assume that someone else has set them. Chock wheels in both directions. Verify that safety equipment such as safety showers and eye wash stations are present and operational before conducting loading/unloading activities. Ensure that proper tools are used for loading/unloading operations. They must be clean and in proper condition at all times. Tank car tanks containing flammable or combustible gases or liquids should be electrically grounded and bonded during loading and unloading operations. A good safety practice is to check the continuity of the ground prior to loading or unloading. Grounding and bonding of cars carrying other commodities is also encouraged. The loading/unloading area should have adequate lighting and be free of obstacles or unnecessary equipment. Before shipment, the condition of every tank car must be examined. No person may offer for transportation a tank car containing a hazardous material, including a residue, unless it is determined that the tank car is in proper condition for safe transportation. Prior to loading or unloading, inspect the following parts of the car. Examine the safety appliances. This would include the steps, grab irons, ladders, and platforms to ensure that none are broken, loose, or missing. Look under the car to make sure that brake rigging is not broken or dragging. Look at the end cap and be certain all 3 bolts are in place and secured with a tab to prevent movement. Tank cars must be equipped with double shelf couplers. Inspect the trucks and couplers to make certain there are no visible defects. Before loading/unloading, inspect the car for damage and the presence of a defect card. If either is found, contact the car owner for further instructions before loading. Examine the tank shell and heads for defects such as dents, cracks, and evidence of leaks. The jacket on a tank car should not be torn or have significant damage. Check all piping, valves, fittings, and gaskets, including those not used, for evidence of leaks or corrosion. Is there evidence of tampering, such as a broken seal? Look for missing or loose bolts. Examine pressure relief device, including any frangible disc, to ensure it is present and there is no sign of leakage. Make certain there is no debris, such as old seals, in the safety valve. If the safety device is a combination safety valve and rupture disc, open the telltale to check that the rupture disc has not failed. Make sure all required markings and stenciling are legible, and the qualification date marking is current. Verify that the tank car is a specification tank, CTC, AAR, DOT, or TC, and is compatible with the product. Also check that tank car linings, coatings, or material are compatible with the commodity being transported. Some types of hazardous materials require special protective features. For example, Division 2.1 flammable gases must be shipped in tank cars that have head shields and thermal protection. Some Class 8 materials, such as acids, must be shipped in tank cars that have a certain lining or coating. Know if your materials have any special requirements and be certain to check the stenciling to make certain your car meets these requirements. All tank cars must be qualified periodically. The qualification stencil will show when inspections were done, what type of pressure relief device the car is equipped with, any lining or coating, and when qualification is due. The date each was completed and the due date is stenciled on the tank car. Check these stencils prior to loading to make certain the tank car has not exceeded any of the stenciled due dates. Tank cars with a safety vent rupture disc will be stenciled with the burst pressure of the rupture disc and may be stenciled not for flammable liquids or not for flammable or poisonous liquids. When the rupture disc is examined, make certain it is marked with a burst pressure rating that matches the safety vent burst pressure stencil on the tank car. The proper shipping name must be marked on two sides in lettering that is at least 3.9 inches high for all commodities listed in 49 CFR Section 172.330A1-2. This includes all flammable gases, poison gases, and certain other high-hazard materials. Tank cars containing a poison or toxic inhalation hazard material must be marked inhalation hazard on both sides in lettering that is at least 3.9 inches high unless the words inhalation hazard appear on the placards displayed on the tank car. On tank cars, the identification numbers must be displayed on an orange panel, on a white square-on-point display, or on a placard. A square-on-point configuration is a white card the same size as a placard with the ID number 3.5 inches high in the center. Most commonly, the identification number is displayed on a placard with the ID number 3.5 inches high in the center. A placard must be readily visible from the direction it faces and be displayed on both sides and both ends of the rail car. It must be securely attached or placed in a holder, be displayed so that the words or identification number read horizontally from left to right, be located clear of appurtenances such as ladders as much as possible, located so that dirt and water will not be thrown upon them, and be maintained so that color, format, legibility, and visibility are not substantially reduced. When loading a tank car, be certain to leave proper outage. Know how much outage is required for the material and the tank car. Use the appropriate outage chart when loading compressed gases in a tank car. Do not overload by weight or volume. Monitor the car to make certain nothing is leaking. During the loading-unloading process, cars must be attended by trained personnel or monitored by an approved monitoring system. Do not allow the loading-unloading operation to stand unattended or unmonitored while connections are attached to the car. If necessary to discontinue operations for a period of time, all valves must be closed, all connections removed, and the car must be prepared as if ready for transportation. However, operations can be discontinued on an attended or monitored car by closing valves on the car and closing valves at the facility without disconnecting hoses. Prior to releasing car, check that car is not overloaded. Ensure all fittings, including those not used, are properly closed. All caps and/or plugs must be in place, properly tightened by the proper tool, and attached by a cable or chain to prevent misplacement. Verify that protective covers are closed and secure and the covers for openings are in the closed position. And check to ensure caps for interior heater coil inlet-outlet pipes are on the pipes. You may encounter an issue with a car that will require the shipper or car owner to get a one-time movement approval from the Federal Railroad Administration before the tank car can travel. Some examples would be a hole in a tank car jacket or a liquid valve that was repaired and needs a bubble leak test. Prior to moving, the car may need to be marked Home Shop, Do Not Load in some fashion. Always check list when examining tank cars. Remember that any defects must be corrected prior to the shipment of the tank car. Notify the railroad of defects found in safety appliances or running gear prior to the release of the tank car. Section 2. General Service Tank Cars. General service tank cars are used to transport liquids or flowable solids. On most of them, the valves and fittings are visible on the top of the tank car. General service fittings may include the following: bottom outlets, internal or exterior heater coil systems, top valves and fittings, top-operated bottom outlets, manway, and pressure relief devices including safety valves and safety vents. Bottom outlets can be operated either from the bottom of the tank car or from the top of the car. Both types of bottom outlets must be checked to make sure they operate properly and are not leaking prior to loading. A recommended practice is to remove the bottom outlet cap or plug during loading. Make certain the outlet valve is closed and any auxiliary valves are open while loading. Prior to removing the cap or plug, put a bucket or spill pan down to catch any spillage. And check that there is no leakage through the valve. Check that the bottom outlet cap and/or plug are attached to the car by a chain or cable to prevent misplacement of the cap or plug. Examine the condition of the gasket in the outlet cap and the threads on the outlet cap and plug. Make certain there are no leaks when finished loading or unloading, and be certain the operating handle is secured in the closed position. When a car is equipped with a top-operated bottom outlet, be certain to loosen the packing nut prior to operating the valve and secure the packing nut when finished to prevent leakage. The operating handle must be attached by a chain or cable to prevent misplacement. And again, be certain the outlet is closed and the operating handle has been secured prior to shipping the tank car. If a tank car is equipped with interior heater coils, they must be checked for leakage. During loading, leave the outlet caps off the heater pipes and watch for leakage through the pipes. After the car is loaded, secure the heater coil caps on the pipes to prevent a leak in case a heater coil fails in transit. Check for leaks while loading the tank car. Do not overheat the car and check for steam leaks from the coils. Examples of top valves and fittings include liquid valve, vapor valve, vacuum relief valve, and safety valve or safety vent with a rupture disc. Check all top valves for operation, including valves and fitting you do not use. Examine valves for evidence of leaking through the plug, where the valve attaches to the car, and/or through the valve stem. All valves must be closed when the car is shipped and the closures tight, even fittings not used at your location. Listen to vacuum relief valves for evidence they are not closing properly and allowing vapors to escape. Never use a vacuum relief device to relieve pressure in a tank car. When the top valves are not under a protective cover, handles for the valves must be removed. All protective covers must be pinned in the closed position during transportation. Be certain the pin is not damaged and will stay in place. Manway gaskets must be inspected for condition, positioning, and compatibility with the material in the tank car. Manway gaskets should stay in place when the manway is opened. If it does not, then it could be the wrong size and may slip out of position when the manway is closed. Failure of manway gaskets is a significant source of leaks in transportation. Inspect manway gasket surfaces and the manway bolts for damage or a condition, such as bent bolts, bad threads, or a bad washer that would prevent proper closure of the manway. If there is extensive dirt or rust on the bolt, the use of an appropriate lubricant on the bolts is advised. Manway bolts must be tightened in a star pattern to ensure that the manway is evenly tightened and there is a good seal on the gasket. All bolts must be tool tight when finished. When tightening manway bolts, the use of a torque wrench to achieve uniform tightness is recommended. Contact the car owner for proper manway torquing values for the type of gasket being used. During unloading, remember that the tank car must be vented either by use of a closed system or vent to the atmosphere. Do not rely on the vacuum relief valve. When a tank car is equipped with a safety vent, check the rupture disc. During loading, remember that both sides of the disc must be checked for damage. Prior to shipment of the tank car, verify that closures are secure and not leaking by either doing a pressure test or by holding the car for 24 hours, then re-inspecting the car. Section 3. Pressure tank cars. Pressure tank cars are used for compressed gases and certain high-hazard materials. They differ visually from most of the general service cars, as the valves and fittings are mounted on the top of the tank car in a protective housing and are not visible. Pressure car fittings may include liquid and vapor valves, gauging devices, sample lines, thermometer well, and safety valves and regulating valves. Examine the base of valves, the closure plugs, and valve stem seals of each valve on pressure cars for leakage. Plugs, other than quarter-inch plugs in sample lines and gauging devices, must be attached by a cable or chain to prevent misplacement. On magnetic gauging devices, examine the rod for a commodity name. If one is present, is it appropriate for the material the car is carrying? Thermometer wells and magnetic gauging devices have an O-ring that must be inspected. If there is a problem with either of these, the O-ring prevents material from escaping. The cover on thermometer wells and magnetic gauging devices are intended to be hand-tightened. Do not over-tighten these covers by the use of a tool. It will damage the O-ring. Check sample lines to ensure that they are closed and the plug is tight. Check for leaks at the base. Protective covers must be secured in the closed position. Access ports in the housings must have covers, and these covers must be closed. Prior to shipment of the tank car, verify that closures are secure and not leaking by either doing a pressure test or by holding the car for 24 hours, then re-inspecting the car. Let's take a minute to summarize the practices presented in this video. Check condition of tank car and fittings, making certain that all fittings, including those not used, are examined and are secure and not leaking. Properly close and secure all fittings and protective covers, including the ones you did not use. Check condition of stenciling, paying attention to due dates and commodity stencils. Do not overload by weight or volume. Make sure placards and markings are correct and in good condition. And remember, always use a checklist to ensure that all components are checked and in good order. According to DOT regulations, if a tank car leaks in transit during normal rail operations, it is assumed the car was not properly prepared and inspected prior to being released for transportation. The shipper may be liable for all costs associated with the response and cleanup and can be subject to penalties for failure to comply with the requirements. For further information, please refer to the U.S. Department of Transportation requirements found in 49 CFR Sections 173.31 and 174.67 of the Hazardous Material Regulations. In Canada, these requirements are found in Canadian General Standards Board 43.147, Part 4, Sections 30.14 through 30.17, as referenced in the Canadian Transport Dangerous Goods Regulations. The Association of American Railroads Manual of Standards and Recommended Practices M-1002 contains information on authorized valves and fittings and maintenance requirements. Bureau of Explosives Pamphlet 34, contained in the BOE tariff, or available at the NAR website at www.nar.aar.com, provides additional information on loading and unloading of tank cars.